Welcome. This is Eric LaPlaca. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Service in the commercial business at Tufts Health Plan. I want to thank you for joining us for this webinar event, Diversity and Inclusion, a Business Imperative. We're excited to host this webinar. This is the first of a series of events we will bring to you on topics impacting your organization's business. You'll hear more about these from me over the next year. Toward that end, we will be sending out a survey asking for topics for future events. We look forward to hearing your suggestions. Now, I'd like to introduce our presenter for today's session, Juan Lopera. Juan is responsible for business development, marketing, and community relations for Tufts Health Plan's Public Plans Division across Massachusetts and Rhode Island. He is also our Corporate Business Diversity Officer and is responsible for company-wide diversity efforts. In fact, Juan was pivotal in establishing business diversity as a critical part of our business here at Tufts Health Plan. It is this role that prompted us to bring him to present to you today to share our company's successes and challenges in standing up a diversity and inclusion program. He also serves on the boards of several organizations. You can read his full bio on LinkedIn, but I'll just share a couple here. He serves on the Dimmick Center Board as Vice Chair and sits on the State of Massachusetts Latino Advisory Commission and the Boston Foundation Latino Legacy Fund. With that, I'll turn it over to Juan Lopera.
Thank you for joining us today for this webinar event on diversity and inclusion, a business imperative. Very excited to have you join us today. This is a topic that Tufts Health Plan has been embarking in for several years now, and we're excited to bring this discussion to you today. So business diversity, the role I have as the Business Diversity Officer is unique in the fact that it has the word business in front of it. A lot of diversity initiatives, as you may be familiar, are diversity officer roles that tend to align with human resources. Human resources is a key component which we'll talk about, but it's not the only component of our strategy. When we embarked in this work years ago, as you can see on the cover page, we had our CEO join something called the CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion. At the time, it was only a handful of CEOs. Now, there are over 800 CEOs who have pledged to implement diversity and inclusion initiatives in their organization. This has become, started nationally, now has become a multinational initiative of CEOs across the world pledging the work in this space. We are also in the work we do have had several other accolades that have come with the great work, which I'll describe. New England Human Resources Association. We also, from Human Rights Campaign, received the Best Places to Work for LGBT Equality, and several others. And so that's one of the aspects of this work, definitely very compelling externally, and the accolades that have been received really have been credit to the great work that the company has taken on, which we'll talk to in the later slides. So what we'd like to cover today in our key messages is first to level set the conversation. We'd like to discuss the demographics and the demographic shifts that we're seeing in our region. And that really sets the stage for why this work is imperative to every business, and regardless of what industry you're in. We'll also like to share with you our own journey. Each organization has its own journey in diversity and inclusion. You may have components of this work already in place. You may be considering starting your own diversity and inclusion program. So you may be anywhere along the journey, and we certainly I'd like to humbly think that we are just getting started and have a ways to go, but would like to share with you what we've done to date. Also, discuss how to engage your employees to contribute to this. As is often said, it takes a village to do this work, and it's critically important that this not be an initiative that's only important to any one individual, any one team, but really impactful from the mailroom to the boardroom of an organization. So those are the key objectives of our discussion today. So as we think of the demographic shifts, certainly it is no secret that diverse communities are growing in numbers. And what you see here in two of the regions where Tufts Health Plan does business, Massachusetts and Rhode Island, there are a number of what we refer to as majority-minority communities, cities, towns where more than half of the population is ethnically diverse. And that's current state. As we project out the demographics broken up by different ethnic groups projected out to 2028, the growth, really, the population growth in our state and in our regions really come from diverse communities. As you could see, Hispanic, Asian, African American communities growing in double digits. So that right there is the reason why this work is critical. Again, regardless of what industry you're in, serving your customers, attracting talent to your organization will continue to come from a more diverse region. Doing the work really then has to become both a go-to-market business imperative, but also a critical aspect of how you source talent into your organization. So based on that demographic shift that we described, our strategy at Tufts Health Plan really cuts across every aspect of our business, where we set business goals on how we improve service and quality for our members, how we address potentially avoidable medical costs by addressing health disparities, how we outreach to our diverse consumers to build brand loyalty, and as we are seeing, it continues to be a differentiator for us in the marketplace when working with employers and clients. And last but certainly not least, in order to attract, retain, and develop diverse talent, we certainly need to be very mindful of how we outreach to the community. So as we think of our business diversity program, we really look at multiple pillars of the work. We look at workforce, we look at customers, community, and suppliers, and all under a foundational governance structure and level of measurement that needs to be put in place. So as you think of your own organization, I would invite you to think beyond some of the traditional areas for diversity and inclusion, which tend to focus on the upper left, workforce, and they tend to stop there. Having been on the healthcare side on the business side of healthcare, I should say, my interest in doing this work really cut across all of these dimensions because I knew, based on my own background as someone who came to this country at a young age and struggled with accessing healthcare and language barriers at one point, I knew that the healthcare, at least for me and my family as a young adult, did not work as it was intended. So doing this work really became a passion and one that helped to think through all of the other dimensions of how the work is structured beyond workforce, looking at how customers, how anyone can better cater to a more diverse customer segments through culturally and linguistically oriented services, and then how, as an organization, how organizations can engage in the community where they do business. And then certainly suppliers. As large organizations, we hire a lot of external help, vendors, suppliers, and there's a unique opportunity for organizations to provide more of the contracts and more opportunities to diverse suppliers so that they could thrive in the local economy. So we'll dissect each of these pillars as we go deeper into our discussion. Starting with workforce diversity. We know, and there's plenty of studies that show that the more diverse the workforce, the more innovative and the better results you can have. There are more and more research papers out there. There's one from McKinsey that I would recommend that speaks to the value of diversity in really increasing profitability for organizations. So workforce is a key contributor to business performance. The approach we have taken is we zeroed in on staff and leadership diversity. As an organization, we're fortunate being in healthcare, where we have significant diversity of gender. 72% of our staff are females. Where we have less diversity, as we have seen, is within the ethnic diverse groups. 32% of our staff is diverse. Actually, that number is higher than the regional average. But as you see in many organizations, when you start to look at towards the top of the organization and leadership positions, is when you start to see the numbers dwindle. So we've had a concerted effort at Tufts Health Plan to, number one, track the data. Data is power, to be able to look in the mirror and say, where do we have opportunities? And where we honed in on the opportunity, it was on the manager and above positions, where we found that there was less diversity. We implemented a diverse slate policy so that every manager and above position that is open would have at least one diverse candidate in the candidate pool. So that's been fairly successful in the early phases to increase the number of jobs filled with diverse candidates. We also have spent quite a bit of time on training our staff, and this is across all of our staff, to increase cultural competence, address issues related to unconscious bias. When we rolled out our training program, we focused very much on addressing cultural competence, especially for customer-facing roles. We had specific modules that address the needs of our staff as they engage with increasingly diverse customer populations to increase the quality of those interactions. We actually required a training across all of our staff, and we were pleased to see the amount of adoption. Even other courses in the past that have been required don't have the level of adoption that we had with our cultural competence training that got close to 100% participation. Pretty excited about that. The other key lever to our work is our business resource groups. Many companies call these employee resource groups. We have 5 BRGs, as we call them. You can see them listed on the bottom: women, multicultural, that we call Mosaic, LGBTQ, which is our PRISM group, veterans and military, and then our disabilities BRG. What is unique about how we rolled these out is we wanted our BRGs to have an impact across a model we call the 4 Cs: careers, culture, community, and commerce. So each BRG has a task or a business plan that they put in place that cuts across all of those 4 Cs, where they try to impact across all of those domains. We've been very pleased to have now 600 members, 20% of our staff, which is really, I'd say, above industry average for ERG participation. And what we found is that now we can really multiply the work we do around diversity and inclusion, because now we have these many more internal champions who want to move this work ahead. So those are some of the highlights from our workforce activities. One workforce diversity initiative that I'd like to spend a minute on is our Unconscious Bias Day. So I mentioned we have done training that has been computer-based training that we rolled out. But what our BRGs did completely on their own, they came up with this idea, or they all wanted to address individually unconscious bias. So we brought them all together and said, well, that's a common theme. We should figure out and dedicate a day to unconscious bias. So we essentially turned the keys on this idea to the BRGs and let them shape it, gave them the resources they needed and support they needed. But really, it was something that we never tried before. We basically just said, come up with the idea, the day, and then present it to leadership just as we get ready for it. So we, leading up to the day, there were a number of things that were done. The first one was the unconscious bias wall, where weeks before the Unconscious Bias Day, we, in our diversity gallery, which we have in our building, in our main headquarters, we had a wall where people could use sticky notes to put their thoughts around unconscious bias, whether they've observed it, whether they've been the victim, if I should say, of unconscious biases, if they've and then also if there were any reactions to what was on the board. And we were pleasantly surprised with the amount of engagement from our employees, the number of comments that were posted, really covering every aspect of unconscious bias across different affinities, gender issues, issues related to race, issues related to one topic that was on our wall was the concept of white privilege. A lot on that. There was a lot around ageism. So it was a really good venue for our employees to really voice their thoughts on this topic, and it really allowed us to really unearth a critical issue that we felt needed to be addressed. We are a very inclusive organization. We've done a lot of work in this space, but we had never turned the keys over to our employees this way to say, tell us exactly what you think. So that was all leading up to the actual day where we carved out an entire morning for employees on a volunteer basis to participate. And we were, again, pleasantly impressed with the amount of participation. We had over 600 employees who took part in that day, Unconscious Bias Day. We did a number of things, including skits demonstrating microaggressions. So this was our Women Together BRG that led that particular program, where they acted out some things that have been observed in the workplace, and they showed the incorrect behavior, and then played out another skit that showed a better way to handle a particular situation in the workplace. There were a number of presentations from all the other BRGs and videos provided so that everyone can open their minds to this topic. We also brought external speakers. We had Paul Francisco, who's the Chief Diversity Officer of State Street. We had Dr. Thea James from Boston Medical Center, who's Vice President of Inclusion at Boston Medical Center. So it was a great collaboration across our BRGs, across our HR department, to make that day a very successful day. So I present that information to you as you think about ways of engaging your employees. Maybe a similar type of event you could consider, maybe not at that scale, maybe a similar scale or even bigger based on your organization. But I think providing your employees a venue to speak up and share their experiences related to unconscious bias is a great best practice that would like to offer. So as we think of customers, which is another area of priority for our work around business diversity, we first start by looking at the demographics. And this, in many ways, is what started the overall business diversity program. We looked at the demographics of our customer base and realized that the diversity was highly underrepresented within our customer base. And given the demographic shifts that I spoke about earlier, we found that there was a big opportunity for us. But it did require a better understanding of demographics for our customer base. And not just the ethnic makeup, but also given that we're in healthcare, in our case, I'll call it the consumer behavior when it comes to healthcare access and the medical cost associated with our customers and opportunities that existed. And also the member experience for our diverse customers. So we spend a lot of time assessing the demographics, which very applicable to pretty much every industry. Assess who your client base is, who your customers are from a demographics makeup standpoint. We then embarked on a number of initiatives. I'll highlight one, our multicultural service program we launched last year. We've graduated a number of folks from this program. This was done in partnership with Bunker Hill Community College. Given that we have a growing customer base of Spanish-speaking members, we decided to start by creating this multicultural service program where our call center staff, who are bilingual, were certified to provide service to our Spanish-speaking members in their direct language. So that was a tremendous collaboration again with Bunker Hill. Also, our employees who went through that program and became certified had the opportunity to pursue credits. They received credits from Bunker Hill Community College to pursue their degree. And then the other highlight on customers is what we refer to as health equity. When we look at health disparities and within our population by breaking out different clinical domains and assessing where there's opportunities, which we'll speak to next in our health equity work. So when we looked at health equity, we looked at our customer base again, and here I'm presenting to you an employer health profile. This is an actual customer base and an actual employer and the population of employees that they have broken out into two cohorts. We have a majority diverse employee base that was comprised of factory workers and a majority non-diverse, which was the headquarter employees, the administrative staff. Equal size, roughly 1,800 members, 1,400 members, so a very credible data set, if you will. And by looking at the two cohorts based on the different demographic characteristics, we found, as we had seen in external literature, similar health disparities within our population for this particular employer where we had much higher emergency department utilization. We had a much higher prevalence of diabetes, hypertension, and cholesterol. So all very actionable data points that we were able to present to our client, to this particular employer, to address these particular issues with culturally oriented clinical programs. We found this data to be extremely insightful and also, again, a great opportunity to partner with a large employer to address these particular health disparities. As I mentioned in my introduction, suppliers are another key pillar of this work, especially for large organizations. You would be contracting with a lot of vendors, a lot of suppliers. So that presents a unique opportunity to address a key issue that we face in our region, and that's economic and wealth disparities. Many of you may be familiar because it was quoted in a Boston Globe spotlight series on race. Recently, there was a statistic from the Boston Federal Reserve from 2015 that showed that the median net worth for a black household in our region in Massachusetts is $8. And the Globe actually, in parentheses, said it is not a typo. And that's in comparison to $250,000 for a white household. And that's an economic disparity that's right here in our backyard, in our neighborhood, which is really something that we, as an organization of our size, we felt we could do something about. So that really became, in many ways, the basis and the interest that we took on addressing supplier and creating our supplier inclusion program. We started by having a supplier inclusion policy, and it's pretty simple. Basically, for any contract that is up for renewal or any new need that we have from an outside vendor or supplier, we look to have at least one diverse-owned business. That could be LGBT-owned, women-owned, minority-owned, veteran-owned, disabled-owned business. So we started with that a few years ago and have had tremendous success by also engaging many of our stakeholders internally in collaboration with our purchasing department to more than quadruple our spend with diverse suppliers. We started with a base of about $4 million a year, now tracking at more than $16 million a year in, again, contracts and opportunities that are provided for diverse-owned businesses. We also expanded our outreach in this space. We are part of many organizations that I would encourage you to look into if you're not already participating in Massachusetts. There's the Massachusetts LGBT Chamber of Commerce that started about 2 years ago, and a few long-standing trade organizations for diverse suppliers include the Center for Women in Enterprise and the Greater New England Minority Council. We also are members of Disability In, and recently, over the past, say, 2-3 years now, have been part of a program called Paysetters, which was started by the Boston Chamber of Commerce in collaboration with Eastern Bank and a program called the Business Equity Initiative. Again, all to provide opportunities for minority-owned businesses in our region to really address the economic disparity that I mentioned earlier. And the final pillar of our strategy is our community work, community engagement work, and partnerships to promote our brand visibility and employee engagement. We are fortunate that with our foundation, with our Tufts Health Plan Foundation, we're able to make a significant impact. The foundation has awarded over $32 million to non-for-profits in our region. We also made a very direct connection between the corporate citizenship work and our business resource groups through what we call strategic partnerships. So what we did is we gave each of our BRGs the ability to give out grants. And the BRGs got to decide which non-for-profit organization they would award the grants to. So every year, the BRGs have, we have 5 BRGs, they each get $5,000 to provide to a non-for-profit. So they get to learn about philanthropy, they are trained in philanthropy, and then they engage in an assessment of different organizations that align with the affinity of the BRG, but also organizations that would apply for these grants. So it's been a great way to connect and engage our employees with our corporate citizenship work. We also spend a lot of time placing our senior leaders on boards, and we try to be very strategic about that alignment so that we cover the different affinity groups that are part of our focus. So we spend time thinking about involvement of our leadership on boards for people with disabilities, or in certain diverse communities, or women-led organizations, really aligning again with the BRG work that I described earlier. So the question now is, after describing all of the different pillars of the work, is how does this work get done? And again, every organization will have its own journey and its own structure to this work. But one thing that is important is to have a well-defined and funded, because this work requires to have some budget to do the work, but having a governance structure that allows you to do this work and to be able to measure the impact of the work. If you can't, it's hard to accomplish really what you can measure, so measurement is key. Leadership buy-in is really important. We were very fortunate that from day one, our CEO was very committed to this work. Tom Croswell, as I mentioned earlier, signed the CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion, and has been a tremendous champion of this work within his leadership team, his senior management group, to engage everyone. So it really goes to the boardroom all the way to the mailroom. As I said, leadership buy-in is the start, but how you engage everyone else is really where the work begins. The governance structure is critical. You need to have, you don't need an army of people. In our case, we have a team of 4 dedicated staff to this work. Every organization may have different team sizes, but I think what is important is that this work is not done by any one team. Certainly it needs to be led by a dedicated team, but it needs to engage everyone across the organization. And you do that through a governance structure and committees that allow you to bring everyone under the tent. And then certainly, as I indicated, what is you can't accomplish what you can't measure. So we've put in place a number of dashboards, business diversity dashboards, and regular reporting to all staff, so they can understand the progress that we're making across all of the domains of the work, whether it be workforce, whether it be suppliers, customers, etc., and different initiatives. We have a progress update that is sent out regularly to keep everyone abreast of the great impact that is done, but also to hold those accountable for milestones that are not met, because this work is challenging, and you don't always accomplish everything that you set out to do. You certainly don't always accomplish it at the pace that you want to, because you want to. Many of us who live and breathe this work want to see that the results met at a much faster pace, but being able to calibrate with the company culture is really important. So governance and measurement are key to the success of this work. So as we wrap up, I'll leave you with a few final thoughts. Number one, the shift in demographics really present an opportunity and an imperative for diversity and inclusion. And I would challenge all of us to think about diversity as not just a workforce activity, not just a community and volunteer activity, but really look across all of the domains and all the levers that I discussed throughout the presentation, and certainly look at it as a business imperative and as a business opportunity, given this significant demographic shift in our region and across the country. And number two, start somewhere with your diversity program. Chances are you probably are somewhere along the journey. Pretty much every organization has some sort of diversity focus, but certainly look across the full spectrum, as I stated earlier: workforce, community, customer, suppliers. And then continue to find ways to engage employees. Really, that's the way you multiply the impact is when you can engage your workforce in doing this work. And finally, I'd like to share with you a few references, a few good articles that we've used in the past as we've been building on this work and on our journey. I stated earlier, McKinsey has a really good article called Diversity Matters that really ties diversity to bottom line improvement and bottom line impact. The CEO Action for Diversity and Inclusion, which our CEO Tom Croswell is a signator for, has another great set of resources, and they have a website with a lot of the best practices. And there's a number of other ones that I won't read through, but listed here for you to reference. Certainly encourage you to look at these, leverage them as you build your own business case, if you will, for this work and to scale up the work. And then finally, if you have any further questions, we certainly would love to hear from you. We have an email address, diversity@tufts-health.com. We'd love to hear from you, your thoughts on this webinar, any feedback for future webinars, or any additional topics you want to take a deeper dive into. We'd be more than glad to spend more time with you on this topic of diversity and inclusion as a business priority. Thank you again for your time. Again, my name is Juan Lopera, and happy to spend a few minutes with you and to look forward to connecting on this topic in the future.